Do you think your dog can hold a sit at your side despite chaos erupting all around? What if I told you this is something that you can have? That's exactly what we're talking about today. Welcome back to the McCann Dogs Podcast. Are you a good negotiator?
He thinks he is.
Well, I hate to break bad news to you. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, as they say, but there are certain things that we should not be negotiating over. There are certain things, sort of like my child is crossing the street. I need them to look both ways before they go, or I need them to take my hand before they go, or I need them to ask for help when they're at an age before they are ready to do this stuff independently. I'm not going to go negotiate that with my child.
Right.
I am going to say, no, this is an absolute must. I'm going to keep you safe. And this is how I'm going to do it. So there's no negotiation with this. The only negotiation is that if you don't do this thing, we're done out here and you're not crossing the street, period. So why is that important?
Well, we're looking out for our child's safety.
Yeah.
The last thing we want is our child to get hurt or injured. I guess those are the same things,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Or even just emotionally startled.
Yeah. So if your child says to you, I don't like my seatbelt, what do you say to them?
You have to wear it. It's for your
Yeah.
safety, and it is the law too.
Perfect.
Yes.
There are certain things that we should not negotiate with our dependents over, and we talk about this because we're going to talk about this today in connection with dogs, of course. There are some things that we should not negotiate with our dogs over, and I find that there's a lot of space out there right now where people are trying to negotiate and wait for their dogs to offer behaviors. And while that is a really wonderful thing for a trained dog who's already been taught that there's value in this thing, it's really not the best way to go about things with an untrained dog.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about that. What would you say are the skills that you would never negotiate with your dog?
One of the first ones is sit at my side. When I ask you to sit at my side, it means sit at my side. It doesn't mean
that.
get up and walk away. It doesn't mean flop on the ground. It doesn't mean jump on the person walking by. It means hold that sit at my side.
Right. And how do you get them there?
I teach them. I train them. Yes.
Okay.
So I follow a training program with lots of practice. I work my way up to with distractions. There's lots of rewards. There's fixing them if they make mistakes.
Okay.
But having a dog that sits at your side is so useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're teaching this skill, so let's start at the very beginning for people so that we can create this very clean picture for anybody who is listening. How do you start teaching your dog the sit behavior, like just right from the get-go?
Well, when they're a brand new puppy, I'll teach them the sit by luring them into a sit. So I use a hand signal.
Does that mean you're like, I'm going to lure you into the
No.
alleyway?
It means I'll pinch a treat between my fingers, and I'll use an upwards motion. And I'll put the treat really near the puppy's nose, and I use a slow upwards motion.
Okay.
And as the puppy's nose follows that treat upwards, their weight will shift back, and they'll end up sitting on their butt. The moment I see their butt hit the ground, I say yes, and I let them have that treat.
Perfect. So that is a great introduction to sit. This is very, very beginner stages where we are teaching our dogs. Our puppies already know how to sit when they're baby puppies, but they don't know how to sit in relation to us.
Right.
They know how to sit when they choose to sit, but what we want to teach them is how to respond to cues from us to sit.
I think people with very young puppies often will have them come to class and they say, my puppy already knows how to sit.
Yeah.
But
we hear this a lot,
right?
actually.
But the puppy truly doesn't really know how to sit. What they're recognizing is your standing up body language, looking down at them, often holding a treat in your hand. And the puppy, to see you better, often sits back on its haunches, and you think the puppy has learned the sit.
Yes.
Whereas the puppy's reading body language, not recognizing a word yet.
Exactly. And you just nailed it, because the problem is that they're not recognizing the word in connection to that sit. Okay.
Yeah.
I just have to describe what's going on here in the podcast room for a minute, because it's really funny. So here is young Honda at 15. And young Honda no longer hears.
Nope,
so
not a thing.
Whenever young Honda is doing something that is in need of being redirected or rechanneled, he needs hand signals. And when he's doing naughty things, he gets dirty looks. So I was just privy to Honda barking here beside me, wanting to have his voice heard on the podcast. And I looked at Swanee's face and it turned into this grimace. And then there was a whole bunch of finger pointing. And Honda resigned to stopping barking and wandered over, and he's now being good as gold on Swanee's couch. Yes. And he's going to lie down and relax now. Oh, yeah. No, he's fighting it.
Honda is on some new medication. So Honda has, I can't remember the exact, it's some mitral valve disease, I believe is what it is. So he is on a new heart medicine, and it's given him a lot of extra energy, I'm finding.
He's got some more pep in his step.
So he is full of beans. So instead of acting like a 15-year-old dog, he's acting like a 5-month-old puppy right now. Yes, on his new medications that he started last week.
I feel good.
Yes.
Yeah, you're a good boy, Honda. You're an Ewok.
He's a very good boy.
And, I mean, he's 15, so this is like the best time for him to be naughty because once they hit that age, they get away with murder. They can do anything they want. But anyways, that was a really funny scene that played out there with the dirty look and then the finger pointing and then Honda going, okay, I'll be good.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the sit.
Right.
All right, so you're saying that we are falsely identifying our dog's ability to sit in some cases. So how do people make sure that they're not doing that?
Well, we need to practice we need to first introduce the verbal too and have the dog fully understand the verbal and without body language. And we also need to practice in many different areas. You know, all our dogs know how to sit in the kitchen. Yeah. Like, I don't think there's a dog in the universe that can't sit in the kitchen when you're holding a treat. However,
and you know what? If you're having trouble with your dog sitting when out and about, get yourself a kitchen costume. And then you can strap that on and you can walk around with it.
Yes, and you're in the kitchen all the time.
That may be the silliest thing I've ever said on the McCann
Shannon's
dog
podcast. Training advice.
Yes, exactly. Is there even a kitchen costume out there?
You know what? You would make one out of a big box.
Yeah, something.
Yes,
something.
Big box, yes.
Something. Halloween people who are creative, let's get to work
on
this. Walking kitchen costumes. Yes. All right, I digress.
Wait, I got it. Kitchen to go.
Ba-dum-bum. We need some wah-wah.
Right. We have
none of them are connected,
none of them
though. We hear them, but they don't end up on the track. So then it's just silence, and people are like, what is wrong with these people? Why am I listening to this podcast? Anyways, okay, let's go back to dogs for a second. So I want to drill down a little bit on this verbal command. So in the perfect world, we spend some time first teaching the dog how to easily get into that sit position by our means, right? So that lure, we do it a bunch of times. It's not just once and then, okay, the dog's got it. Here is something this is my big rant lately. This is the hill that I am on lately. You need to practice each of these steps in different locations. Yes. You can't just practice everything in the kitchen, get things perfect in the kitchen, and then go out there in the real world. Because by the time you do that, A, too much time has passed, and the dog is now, developing before you get them outside. And B, you can't expect them to perform high school level calculus in a brand new spot. Dogs are tremendously situational. So you're expecting once you've got the finished product in the kitchen that they can take that out in the real world and then apply that in the real world. And that's not the way it works for dogs.
Right. Yes.
So most people, if you spend a ton of time in the white room in your house and you neglect developing your dog's ability to take in other sights and sounds as they're learning, they're going to have their minds blown once they get out into the distracting world. So
it's like when you take your 16-year-old teenager out and you teach them how to drive at a far corner of the mall parking lot. And it's like, wow, look at them. They're doing great in the mall parking lot. Yeah. The next thing you're going to do is not take them out onto the busy 6-lane highway.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not ready for that
They're not going on the 401 in Toronto just yet.
Yes. Woo. Yes. They're going to go from the mall parking lot to a quiet side street and to a little bit busier street. There's lots of steps before we get them on the highway.
Absolutely. And sometimes you're going to focus on acceleration, and sometimes you're going to focus on braking, and sometimes you're going to focus on turns, and there's going to be focal points for each lesson so that you can perfect those specific things. And that's not to say that you're neglecting the other things, But you do need to drill down on some of the ideas to make sure that they are solid. And this is the same idea with our dogs. So as an example, once I've lured that sit in the kitchen and my dog knows how to follow the lure in the kitchen, that's great. Now I'm going to go out in the backyard and I'm going to make sure that he knows how to follow that lure when he's on the back deck. And then I'm going to go to the grass and I'm going to make sure he can follow that lure on the grass. And by the time I've gotten through that luring stage of things, it might have only been a day or two, but he has gotten used to following that food lure into the sit in several different places at that point, with several different distractions being present. Now I can move on to the next step, right? And what's the next step?
The next step would be adding, naming it. So that's calling it the sit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we give it a label, and the label is sit.
Yeah, we often say name it once you know it. And, there's always arguments about everything in dog training and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. But we've been here for a long time, and we've seen a lot of those arguments come and go, and then come back around again. So a lot of these things, we are very confident in how we do things, and we love the name it once you know it idea because it gives the dog an opportunity to perfect and identify that particular section of the skill before we start associating a word with it. If you were to be saying sit right away as you're luring, eventually your dog is going to learn that sit cue, but it's not the most optimal learning.
No, it's not as powerful.
Right? Exactly. So if we have the behavior first, right? If I'm learning a new language and somebody is drawing an apple on a cue card for me, right? And they're taking their time drawing it. There may be a point where I can identify that apple, and then you could say, what's apple in French? Pomme. Pomme. That's probably the only French word I know. Pomme. I knew that. So if you were to be saying pomme to me while there's still just the bottom of a circle of an apple, it's going to be really hard for me to identify that. So I'm saying pomme, but there's no association for me, right? What the heck does pomme mean to me? It means a half a circle. Oh, there's a little line coming out of the top. Is that a stem? Oh, okay, it's an apple. Okay, pomme, apple. Okay, I get it.
Right.
But it's not the most efficient way. If you were to show me the picture of a fully drawn, obvious apple, or even show me an actual apple and say pomme,
right,
I'm going to get it right away.
Shannon,
right?
I would like to teach you a different language because I would teach you the exact opposite of what things were, just so when you went away to that country, I could watch you ask the funniest questions.
Oh my gosh. I speak English mediocrely, but I don't speak any languages.
I don't speak any. There's no other language I can teach you. Yes.
I do know like a few phrases and words in French from high school. And I do know a few phrases and words in Estonian because that's my father's side of the family and the heritage. And they used to speak Estonian when I was a kid, but, I could not carry on a conversation in either. So that's definitely, you could teach me whatever you wanted. I'm sure I wouldn't learn. Anyways, so clarity for the dog is what we're going for, right?
Right,
when we are looking for ways to teach the dog, we're looking for the ways that provide the most clarity, not the ways that sort of make things obscure and pick away at their confidence as we're teaching, or things that don't make sense to the dog, so they learn to ignore, right? Like if you keep showing me this thing that I don't know how to identify on a cue card as you're saying pomme, eventually I'm going to go, I don't need to learn what pomme means because there's nothing that makes sense here to me. So what's the point? So this is a really clear way of learning for the dog. It's creating the association.
Right.
But what else is important there?
That we're rewarding the behavior?
Yeah, well, that's one too. Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a minute.
I think I know what you meant.
Yeah.
A separation between the word and the signal.
Yeah, so because we were talking about teaching language.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes. So back to that, yes.
Right,
so we want to say the word so the dog clearly hears it and then show the dog what we want. Yeah. So that's doing our signal. If we do it all at once, chances are dogs are creatures of motion.
Yeah, they are.
And motion distracts dogs. So if I start to move my hand as I say the word sit, now the dog is focusing on my hand. Chances are they're not really focusing on that verbal.
And this will hit home for you if you ever watch two dogs have a conversation. And I think that makes the most sense possible because we know that dogs do not speak to one another. But when you have two dogs together and they're communicating, it is a thing of beauty. And you see very clear intention. And that is all body language, right? That is one dog reading another dog's body language. And it might be the most subtle of signs. They might just be licking their lips. They might be blinking. They might be looking off to the side or turning their head a little bit. Those are huge conversations for dogs to have. So dogs are absolutely natural at watching and trying to interpret your body language.
Right.
So when you're moving as you say the word, they're not going to hear that word. They're focused on your body language, and they will learn what cues you give off with your body language, and they'll associate those with that sit command. So that's not always ideal because we don't always know what we're doing with our bodies as much as our dogs do.
Right, exactly,
but
yes.
what you're talking about is so very important for teaching a good, clear command. Saying sit, pausing just briefly,
right,
and then following through with that lure. So it would be sit, then lure.
Right. And another thing to mention too is stand neutrally when you do it.
Yeah.
A lot of times people
don't be standing on one foot, jumping up and down, touching your nose and rubbing your head. Oh, I can do that.
So a lot of people will put their hand up to their chest and hold the treat. And now that becomes the beginning of the signal. So the dog sees the motion, your hand going up, and in the dog's brain, the signal has now started.
Yeah.
Then you say the word, and now the word's not that important because the beginning is you lifting your hand to your chest. Why do people do that? Why do we pull up our food to our chest and say sit?
I think it's because we're going through the steps in our head.
Right.
I think that's why people do it, because they're thinking so much about, okay, I have to be ready with this. I have to be ready with this. So we're hardwired towards efficiency. So we start doing things before we need to make sure we're prepared. And then that messes up our timing. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Really, really, detail-oriented stuff, but it's really important for the dog's understanding. And I always say to people, if you cannot go around the corner out of sight of the dog and say the command and have them instantly get into the position, they don't yet understand the verbal.
Right.
So I would suggest everybody gets, those big cakes that you can put people in and then you can burst out of the cake at a party. I would suggest everybody gets one of those to test and proof their dog training skills. So when you get in the cake, you can just say sit. And then if your dog gets it right, I don't know how you see them. I mean, maybe a little telescope
there'll be
coming
little
out of the
holes
cake.
or little holes in the little eye holes.
Little eyeball holes.
Yeah.
And then you can get up with the cake and wander around. This is sort of like our kitchen on the go.
Our kitchen on the go,
Cake
yes.
on the go. I'm just out of control, Swanee.
You are out of control this morning, yes.
All right. So we want to make sure that the dog clearly hears the verbal without any interference with body language, signals, etc. So even if you are using a signal with your sit, I might, for the lifetime of my dog, want to be able to use a signal and just scoop up above his nose to have him sit. Nothing wrong with that. The only time that's going to fail me is if my dog can't see what I'm asking for, which is why verbals tend to work well for us in our sort of, in our culture and our society. But you can maintain both if you want to. You can always have a signal. Just separate the two of them, and your dog will learn on both of them for sure. Yes. All right. So now, I want to take this out of the teaching phase in terms of how to actually teach the sit. And make no mistake about it. Hi, sweetheart. Honda is now my couch dog. Make no mistake about it. Our dogs are learning all of the time, and they are adept at learning, especially when they are young. So use that time to your advantage. Do the training, start in a quiet environment, teach them what it is you're looking for them to know, add in distractions in that cycle, and things will continue to evolve. But something that I really want to impress upon people, it's probably not going to go that perfectly right off the hop. And that's the part that I think we get kind of lost over these days. So I see some more dirty looks and finger pointing happening.
I think he might have to go to the bathroom.
Okay, you want to?
Should we take a break?
Yeah, we'll take a break.
Yeah,
taking a break.
Honda had a successful pee break.
Excellent. So it's really important that the dog has a very clear vision and idea of what that sit command means, so that we can now use this command practically out in the real world. And in a perfect world, I can tell my dog to sit wherever he happens to be on one command, and yes, I agree. And he instantly ends up in that sit position.
Exactly,
so
yes.
That is my perfect world scenario. And Honda kicked in his 2 cents there. And I totally agree with what he's saying. I mean, he knows better than anyone, right? If you want a real answer, ask a dog.
Ask a dog, yes.
If you want a real answer about dog training, ask a dog. They will tell you. So my point with this is that what are the chances that every time I say sit in my dog's life, my dog goes, yep, and parks it?
Very, very, very little.
Slim to none.
Slim to none, unless you've done your homework.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and even then, Dogs are dogs. They're not, I thought he was going to miss the couch there too. Dogs are dogs. They're not perfect creatures, right? And here's the thing. Humans are also not perfect creatures.
Right.
And then when you add to that life throws challenges our way, and your dog might be distracted by a squirrel, and you say sit, and they go, no, squirrel. Mm-hmm. And they're out at the end of the leash craning.
Right. So, yes. People often believe just because the dog is trained in one area, they're trained everywhere, or they'll listen every single time.
Yeah.
But even as humans, we know things and we don't respond the same every time. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff we know we shouldn't do that we do.
Absolutely.
And why would we expect a dog to be perfect when we aren't?
Some people have gotten more than one speeding ticket in their life. Right?
Right.
Some people have gotten one speeding ticket, and it's been enough to stop them from speeding ever in the entirety of their lives. Some people require very light speeding tickets. One person might get an $80 speeding ticket and be like, that's it. This is horrible. I'm never speeding again. One person might get a $400 speeding ticket and go, that hurts a little bit, but I'm really late for work. I got to go.
Right.
Yeah. I got to speed. Yeah. I just got to take the chance. Everything is relative. You know, every dog, every situation, they're all different. Every distraction is going to be a different level for a different dog. There's going to be some dogs that see a running bunny and go, oh, look at that guy go. Nice.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some dogs that see a running bunny and go, I'm out of here. I'm going to get that bunny. And there's nothing you can do.
Their whole genetics take over.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we need to look at the variables here. But one thing that we can absolutely control is our ability to insist with the dog.
Right.
And I would say that there are a couple of commands that I use in my life with my dog that I expect absolute compliance on, and I am following through every single time if I don't get compliance on.
Right.
And those would be my foundation skills. And foundation for me is, there's a whole bunch of things in my foundation. A good recall, good walking skills, and sits and downs, I would say. And then everything else sort of blossoms from those things.
Yes.
But if I don't have those foundation skills, and if I don't have those foundation skills solid and oiled to the point where I can rely on them, there's not a lot of point in teaching all of the extra sexy stuff, right?
Yes. If I cannot get my dog to sit when guests come over, then yes, that should be my focus, because that's foundation work. If you watch, agility or any of the other high-end dog sports, those dogs are well-trained dogs. They just didn't go from being a wild puppy to in the agility.
Yeah.
Those dogs have had hours and hours and hours of
hundreds,
training.
thousands of hours in some cases.
Yeah. And not
depending
just
on the level.
Not just in agility, in the foundations of listening, the foundations of listening under distraction.
Absolutely. And that is such a crucial thing. So there are a couple of things that I would say I would always want some means of insisting on. And I think a lot of the times people get to a point in training where the dog is pretty good at something, not necessarily proficient yet, because they haven't necessarily taken it out and proofed it in all sorts of different distractions. And when I say that, what do I mean? What do I mean by taking something out and proofing it with a bunch of different distractions?
It means testing the dog, going out and saying, okay, let's see what you know right now and what I still need to work on.
Perfect. And then in addition to that, I would say that proofing is a way of cementing that understanding in the dog.
Right, yes.
So it sort of makes me think of, do you remember Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss?
I remember, yes.
I loved that book when I was a kid, and I used to read it over and over and over and over and over again. And, and it really reminds me of that. Maybe that's just because of my obsessive childhood nature, reading the same book over and over again. But I think that we have a lot to learn from that situation. Will you do it in the rain? Will you do it on a train? Will you do it in Spain? Will
right? Yes.
So many more Ain rhymes are coming into my head, but I don't want to bore anyone. But this is what proofing to me is all about, right? I'm going to throw something different at the dog in terms of distraction, and I'm going to make sure that I'm in a position to, let's just talk about the sit. We'll keep it simple.
Right.
I'm going to make sure I'm in a position to make the sit happen.
Right.
I'm going to make sure that I'm in a position to make the sit continue to happen. So once I've said sit, my dog should not get up until I say okay. We don't want jack-in-the-box dogs that we say sit, they get their cookie, and then they're up and they're gone, right? So if my dog is still in training, I'm still using a lot of food with him, I'm going to say sit, and then I'm going to say yes when he gets it right, and I'm going to reward. But then I expect him to maintain that sit until I release. And I might continue to reward in there if I'm working with a young dog and building duration. And I might be thinking about spreading out those rewards. I might be thinking about weaning off of the use of those rewards. You know, there's all sorts of different stages I'm going to be at in my training. It's never ever like completely done at that point.
And a question too, when you ask your dog to sit, how many times do you ask them?
32 and a half. 47?
82. No, once.
Should have been 42.
So
once is the right answer.
Yes,
absolutely.
We hear so many people saying sit.
Wait. Sit. Oh no, he was distracted by that fly. Sit. Oh no, wait, he was distracted by a fluff on the ground.
Or I was too quiet. Or there was a noise in the background.
Heard me.
But he does it at home.
Our dogs make us think, oh, there's got to be a reason why not. But truly, sometimes it's just because they're distracted.
And they don't have to.
And they've forgotten we're back there and we've said sit and they're like, nah, what? What? You become like, you know, this background noise that they're not hearing because they're so focused on this thing.
It's like when, I'm trying to think of a situation, but maybe there's a crowd and we're all looking at something and a police officer saying, come on, people, move back, move back. They have to keep repeating it because people aren't listening to them. Yes.
That's a good point. So if then the police officer were to say move back and just gently move you out of the way, and I'm not talking about anything like assault or anything like that. No. This is just physically making the thing happen.
Like taking your shoulder and guiding you.
Exactly. You don't have a choice in that manner. And that is the police officer gently insisting that you do this thing. So this is what we need to think about with our dog as well. In those situations, if I let my dog just ignore me and I go, oh, he was distracted by that bird. He was distracted by the plane. He was distracted by Spain. Okay, I'm back now.
That was good.
If we give our dogs the opportunity to excuse away that non-compliance, then every time there's a bird, it's okay for him not to sit. And that's the message he's gotten.
Exactly,
In this scenario, I don't have to listen to what's going on back there. But if instead I say sit and my dog is busy with the bird, and then I say sit and I gently insist, and we'll talk about what our means of gently insisting in a minute. My dog learns, oh, okay, I have to do this thing. And then maybe he gets caught, maybe he gets his attention caught by the bird again, and he goes, oh, I'm going to go chase that bird. And no, you have to sit. Oh, okay, so I guess when birds are around, I still have to listen. Okay, got it, no problem. That's the thing with our dogs. They don't go, oh, the humanity. I've just been destroyed. My whole life is over. They don't internalize things like humans do. They just go, oh, okay. And they accept, Once you've broken through whatever it is, and don't get me wrong, there's different levels of distraction. There's different levels of compliance and non-compliance with the dogs. There's all sorts of things that go on there. But I'm talking about something that convinces the dog. So placing that sit is what we would do. And describe a sit placement for me.
So a sit placement is where we use our manipulation to place the dog into a sit. So we're going to, if we're working our dog on our left-hand side, we're going to shorten up the leash in our right and put our hands just above the leash clip. We're going to slightly pull upwards as we place the dog's butt into a sit on the ground. Perfect. So it's sit and place. Then I take my hands off the dog, I put a little bit of slack in my leash, and I praise, wait a few more seconds, and then yes, and feed them for holding the sit.
So many good things you said there, and I want to drill down on a bunch
gentle
of them.
insistence. Yes,
absolutely. So first off, with this leash, so you've got a 6-foot leash with a nice gentle J shape in it, and I want to describe this process exactly. So you are cutting the leash in half with your left hand. So you're going to take your left hand, grip about halfway between you and the dog with that left hand, and that gives you the ability to pull the slack out of the leash. Your right hand then goes to just above the clip. Now your left hand lets go because it's no longer needed there, and it goes to the dog's rear. So you're using pressure upwards with the right hand as you tuck the dog into position with your left hand. So this is us saying, no, you have to sit. And we like the sit at our side. why do we like the sit at our side?
I use the sit at my side every day, probably at some point. When I spend a lot of time with my dog. They go a lot of places with me. So when I'm paying my vet bill, my dog is sitting at my side. They're not lunging out at other dogs going by. When I talk to my neighbor, my dog is sitting at my side. They're not, digging on the neighbor's rose bushes or jumping on the neighbor. They're sitting quietly at my side. Yeah. When I go to soccer games, watch kids' soccer games, I have nieces and nephews who are young, and the dog can sit beside my chair or lie down beside my chair even.
Perfect.
So remaining at my side is crucial. How about you? Anything I missed that you use it?
You know what? A million times a day this thing comes in handy. All the reasons that you said, but also any time that I just need my dog to be for a minute.
Right.
So whether it is I'm checking the mail at the end of the road, I'm opening my front door and I need to get my keys out and whatnot, and I can't do that while my dog is investigating and pulling, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, don't get me wrong, we're addressing pulling as well, but it's for illustrative purposes.
Or crossing the street. Cross the street, the dog sits at my side. I can look at traffic, make sure it's safe, then off we go across the street.
Absolutely. Don't just blindly run out into traffic.
Right,
that would be dangerous.
So
we talked about that at the beginning of the episode.
Yes,
already,
we did. We did.
Almost that point.
A dog that's sitting at your side isn't getting into trouble.
Exactly. Yeah. And if I'm walking down the street and I have a young dog who's just learning stuff, right? And I literally do. I have Levon, who is about 8 months old now. He's just about to turn 8 months old. So he's got some really good foundational skills, some really good basic skills. But I would say that this sit placement is something that I have used a ton with him because he's lovely and adorable and wonderful, and I love his energy. It's through the roof, which is great. It's one of the reasons I like Tollers is that they have high energy. Right. It's part of what I like in my working dogs. But he is also naturally impulsive because of that energy. Right. So we've been working on a ton of impulse control stuff, but sometimes it's like, holy cow, what just happened? Like, he's gone before I even get a chance to think about what impulse control games I can apply to this scenario. So something like the sit placement is just, once you've got it practiced, it is so easy to just quickly go and get the dog into a sit at your side. So if we're walking down the street and suddenly there's a leaf blowing because, oh my gosh, he loves to chase those little leaves. If I just need him to just like stop for a second, just stop, get your head. Now we're going to continue forward. Once I'm like, okay, I've decided now that there's a leaf that's really too exciting for my dog. So I'm going to place the sit just so that I can take the energy out of the situation. And then I'm going to say, okay, now we're ready. There's a leaf there. But I've got your attention, I've got your focus, you're calmed just enough because that's what part of the sit placement is about as well. It's taking that scenario and bringing calmness to it, right?
Exactly,
bringing a little bit more control to it. Innately, there's nothing wrong with him chasing a leaf, but in that scenario, you're on leash. You can't be chasing a leaf because you're going to end up pulling me, and I don't want to chase the leaf with you. So, we're at an impasse here, dude.
Yes. And when our puppies are little, we often do the sit in front of us. So we say sit and have the puppy sit out in front.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a new learning experience for the young puppy to learn how to sit at your side rather than out in front of you. Yeah. So that's where the placement part comes. It's a little bit of handling. So it also has a second value of we can maneuver a dog into different positions with our hands, and it's nothing to worry about. The dog learns to go with the flow, and that's going to bleed over into all kinds of different things. Our grooming, going to the vet. Honda recently had his medication changed, as I mentioned earlier, and they had to do some x-rays. And, once again, they had to put him upside down in that cradle to take some x-rays of his heart. And that requires some manipulation. Like Honda just doesn't hop in there and lay on his back like a human would do. Yeah. And he's a little dog, so maybe it's not as hard as if he was a great big Rottweiler. So if you want your dog to be handled and be moved by people and them to say, oh, this is okay, I can do this.
Absolutely.
Not to have the vet put a muzzle on them or maybe sedate them because the dog's going to bite because they're resisting.
Yeah, most definitely. There are so many important handling exercises that you should do with your dog. That is such an important point to bring up for sure. This is a great start, truly. Yeah. If you're teaching your dog that you placing them in the sit, placing them in the down is not anything to worry about, You have tools now that you can use to gently assist with your dog. So now when I go into a scenario and my dog is, okay, I'm really excited about being, let's say, in the store at McCann's, right?
Yeah.
Let's say we're just at the training hall here and young Levon is wandering around. And this has been something that I've been working hard on with him because he is impulsive. And here's the thing. If I want him to be less impulsive or I want to have that impulse under control, I need to work through it.
Right.
You know, it's not, we did an episode last week. The magic is in the work.
Right.
It's not going away on its own.
No, they don't outgrow it.
Yeah. And I'm not finding some magic pill that is going to make this all good.
Right.
You
Or
know?
a magic new collar or a magic harness. There are no such things. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's the work. It's teaching him systematically over and over and over again, this is what you do in this scenario. And then eventually he gets to the point where he might offer that behavior. But in the initial stages, I'm not waiting for my dog. And this is the other thing that gentle insistence allows you to take the choice away from the dog. Because I can almost guarantee you that while you're in the training stages of things, before you have built an incredible amount of value for yourself and all of the things that you encounter with your dog, the things that you want them to focus on instead of those outside distractions, until you have built that value, they're not offering the choices that you want.
No.
You know, when we say we want our dogs to offer us a good choice, we have manipulated that situation to make it so that the dog will want to offer that choice. And just a brief scenario here, just to illustrate this. If I have not taught my dog how to be attentive to me, say, if I've not taught my dog how to look at me as a valuable thing that is often rewarded, if I go out there in the real world and my dog is still so young that they're like, nope, everything out here is super distracting, right? And say I go out there and they're focused on everything out there, all the novel things, right? I'm at the park and I'm waiting for voluntary attention, which would be my dog saying, okay, I'm going to ignore all these distractions at the park and look at you instead. Right? That's like asking a child to go to Disney World and do nothing but stare at mom's face all day. You know?
Right.
There's this big novel world, right? Oh my gosh, look at, there's Mickey, there's Minnie, there's a princess over here. All these things that I am naturally entertained by as a child are going to catch my attention. Right. There's no point that I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to look at mom to do math drills, right?
Yes.
This is not going to happen. It's the same with our dogs. What they find naturally reinforcing to look at, those are the things that they're going to look at.
Right.
Until we say it is super valuable to look at my face, and we establish that through training, first in areas where there aren't those conflicts, right? The dog's not conflicted by a bird when I'm first teaching them how to give me attention.
Right.
Once my dog realizes looking at my face is a really valuable thing, of course, that's going to be part of his choice, right? Self-serving. Dogs are self-serving creatures.
Yes.
So if he knows looking at your face is a valuable thing and often starts the play or starts the fun training session with food or whatever the case may be, once that is valuable to the dog, I can expect that it might be a choice my dog makes.
I have a story that's a little bit off topic, but dogs do figure out
I thought you were going to say something completely unrelated. I went sailing once and the wind was blowing this way.
Dogs do figure out things very quickly that start behaviors. My Cardigan Welsh Corgi, Iggy, who I had when I was in my early 20s, actually I got her as a college graduation gift when I was 19 from my parents. She put it all together that she loved flyball. That was one of her favorite sports. And she realized that the referee standing in the middle of the two lanes, putting his hands out, was what started the race.
Oh, isn't that funny?
And she would stare intently at him barking. And as soon as he started the race, she turned to focus on the race. But she knew that's the man that gets it all started. Oh. And it was very, very interesting.
Funny,
yes,
eh?
that she figured that out. So our dogs are very perceptive.
They really are. And here's the thing. If you are aware of that, you can use that to build value in that situation for something other than the thing that they're staring at. So for example, if I want to teach my dog that when there are birds, that's the appropriate time to look at me because that's when fun starts with me. All I need to do is go and find birds and then incentivize my dog to look at me and make that rewarding. And eventually what's going to happen is the tables will shift and the dog will see the bird and think, I never get to go to the bird. And that's part of what's important. And that's the management piece. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So if the dog never gets to chase the bird is never an option for him. But hey, in this scenario, if you look at me, I take off running the other way and you get to chase and you get to have all this fun. Or you look at me and I feed you for that. Or you look at me and I pull out a toy and I play. Or you look at me and now I release you and we go walk around the park. Anything that is valuable for the dog. Basically, if I create that understanding and behavior, you see the bird, you look at me instead, and that's when good things happen. I shift their understanding of what is going to provide them value.
Yes. And I did just that with, I had another Cardigan Welsh Corgi named Gavin, and I did that with him when he was a younger dog. I had no children at the time, and he saw toddlers in snowsuits.
Okay.
And to him, it looked odd, and he was nervous and growly and.
That's like me when I see toddlers in snowsuits. Yeah.
So toddler. I thought, you know what? I need to rewire his brain that toddlers in snowsuits mean fun.
Yeah.
And Honda had this little toy, and we called it Mr. Koala. It was a tiny koala bear, and for some reason, he loved that thing. And I brought it along with me, and I purposely looked for toddlers in snowsuits.
Yeah.
And we stayed a distance away so he wasn't overfaced by them. And we would play with Mr. Koala. And you know what? After some time, he would see kids and just turn to me like, "Oh, fun is here!" And he started to welcome the children and love the children because now they're associated with something that was great interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are fabulous places to get to with the dog, because then it takes something that is a natural distraction in their life and it puts them in control of saying, but I know that this is what starts that. Right. And in order to get there, the management is a really important component of things.
Yes.
So let's talk about the management for a second. I said it basically in a nutshell. The management is that the dog never gets to chase the bird, right? Because that is so rewarding for the dog that it's probably going to override most of the things that we do.
It's like pulling a slot machine and winning $20.
Yes, exactly. And that is going to be the draw each and every time, right? But I might get that $20 again. I might get that $20 again. So this is why we talk about management so much in connection with things like crating at home, right? So if the dog is crated at home when you can't be with them, they're not getting into mischief. They're not wandering around the house learning that they can dig up the carpet, that they can chew on the couch, that they can raid the garbage.
Or like we talked about a few weeks ago, that they can stick their head in the bathroom garbage and eat the Q-tips.
Yeah, exactly. Honda's like, nope, sleeping now.
Yeah,
I do.
That wasn't me.
I do know wrong.
That wasn't me. That was my sister dog.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, if we can manage these scenarios until we have taught the dog what they should do, then we make our lives so much easier. And this sort of brings me back around to why we were talking about this sit placement today and the power of this sit placement. And that is because we can take the option away from the dog and gently insist that they do what we want instead of what they want.
Right.
And that effectively is management. And it's learning for the dog that they don't have the option of going and flying out after the squirrel that's running, for example.
Jumping on a person going by. Yes.
Exactly. Or pulling in the vet clinic. Or pulling while you're trying to open the front door. If they are sitting at your side, if they are happily crated at home, if they are sitting at your side out and about, they can't get into mischief,
Actually, that just reminds me of a time I used the sit. I had just moved to a new place in Brantford, and I had the 3 dogs, and it was about 11 o'clock at night. I'd actually just gotten home from here, and somebody knocked on my door, and I thought, would be knocking at my door at 11 o'clock at night? Now, this was many, many years ago. So now I probably would just ignore it. But many years ago, young Christine was more adventurous. I'm going to answer the door. And I couldn't see my front door. It was a 3-level townhouse. And I just couldn't see what was there. So I took I left my corgis upstairs and I brought my Belgian Malinois with me. And I had her sit beside me. And I opened the door a crack, and it was a police officer. So I was able to open the door all the way.
Okay.
Because I could see cars with flashing lights and everything. And but I felt safe because I had Saber at my side, and I trusted her 100% that she was going to remain in that sit, and she had a bit of a presence. I think any of my dogs would have had enough presence, but I thought I'll bring the biggest one for now.
Yeah.
And apparently, the person who lived there before me was, I guess, wanted. for something, and they asked me who I was, and I had to show ID that I wasn't that person. And so they were looking for someone who I guess had lived previously at my address. But so all was good. They didn't take me away. But that was a great, I could talk to the police officer, show my ID, and Sabre remained at my side.
Perfect.
And that didn't happen overnight. That was a lot of training I had done with that dog. Yes,
absolutely.
Yes. And I wouldn't expect an untrained dog to be able to do that. No. That would have been too much having a person right at her face. So when we start to train this exercise, we can't do it 10 feet from the birds.
Right.
We need to do it 50 feet from the birds, maybe even further back.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my training with my dog, if I'm starting at 50 feet, I'm going to make sure I have success at 50 feet, and then I'm going to bridge that gap. So a lot of the times I think people get stuck at the outer marker of things that we start when things are going to be easy for the dog. So like staying in the white room forever or staying 50 feet away forever, it's always going to be too exciting to get closer and closer and closer, and it's going to start getting messy. And what should people do when it starts getting messy?
Back away.
Back away?
Or move the distraction. Away. Yeah, move the distraction away. Create distance.
Yeah.
Create distance.
But so I guess my point is I don't want to do that forever because there's always going to be that messy piece, right? So if I start at 50 feet and then I decide, okay, my dog is nailing it at 50 feet. They are just a rock star. I'm ready to go to 40 feet. And I go to 40 feet and now it all falls apart.
Right.
What do I do?
Well, what I'm going to first do is I'm going to try the placement. So I'm going to say, okay, my dog made a mistake. Let's place him to remind him and see if that reminds him enough.
Yeah.
So I'm going to place, and if he's getting it, good dog, I can reward and reward. But if I'm placing and he's just like, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, then I'm going to, probably back off a few steps.
So that might be a situation where I go from 50 feet to 40 feet and it's just terrible. So now I move back to 45 feet. But basically what I want to do is I want to persevere through this.
Right,
I don't want to say, okay, I need to stay at 50 feet for the rest of the dog's life because my dog can't handle it. And here's the thing, as long as I do that, it's not ever going to get any better. And I really want to get to the point where I can be within an arm's reach of that thing. And it might take some stutter steps, right? So I might move forward and then have to move back a bit. But if I have the means of gently insisting, I have the means of making things better.
Yes.
And I think a lot of our dog training has gotten really complicated these days. And we're doing a lot of, asking the dog to do things, not following through. We're doing a lot of waiting for the dog to offer things that they may or may not offer, etc. And truly in those scenarios when it's like, oh, this isn't going the way I really want it to go, I'm just going to revert to something simple. And that for me is one of these exercises. The sit placement it's a huge thing for me. So if my dog is really struggling, you're absolutely right. Giving some a little bit less difficulty to the situation is going to help me get it right. But eventually I need to push through. Eventually I need to say, you know what, dog, I'm sorry, but I gently am going to insist here that you hold this sit, even though you really want to go and see that other dog, even though you really want to visit with this person. Friendly dogs are a nice problem to have. But we still want manners with them, right? Just because my dog is friendly does not make it okay for him to jump up on everybody. Some people might say, like you and me, if I brought Levon out and I was like, okay, you know what? Let's hang out with Levon. He's jumping on me, he's jumping on you, and I like that. And you would encourage it. I know you would. He loves his blonde-haired friend. He loves her.
But when you do ask him to stop, he stops.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and truly, those are things that we would be well advised to put under impulse control. So with Levon, for example, I would not let him do that with everybody. I would let him do that with people that I know are okay with that. And I would let him do that with people that he has learned it is okay through me letting him know. Okay, go wild, also, go have fun, something like that.
Also people who would stop something that happened that was wrong. So if Levi was jumping on me and then suddenly he grabbed my shirt and started to rip it, I'm not going to go, oh, that's fun. Like I'm, hey, like, I'm going to,
like my shirt.
Right.
I want to be clothed right now.
I'm going to respond appropriately.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So you can have the best of both worlds with things.
Yes.
You know, a lot of the times people are like, I don't want a robot dog. Well, you know what? Great. My dogs are far from robots. Holy cow. They have fun. They're lots of fun to watch. They're flashy and they're fast and they're wonderful. I love them. I adore them. But we have lots of fun. I don't want a robot either. No, I'm not interested. If I wanted a robot, I'd get one of those. I get it. Those robots.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
I want a dog who's responsive and can get along in society based on my help.
Yes.
Right.
And I think another key component of our sit placement is to react quickly.
Yes.
So in dog training, we talk about timing, and the correct timing with dogs is to mark poor behavior within 1 second of the poor behavior starting. So dogs are quick. So that means we have to be very quick too. So when I'm working on a sit at my side, I'm not, looking up at the sky and, I'm watching my dog out of the corner of my eye.
Yeah.
The moment I see their butts start to come up, and often it starts with a head bob. Try to get up out of a seat without moving your head. Same with dogs. They often cannot break a sit without moving their head.
That's true. Yeah.
So as soon as I see that little bob forward, I'm not waiting to see what's going to happen. I am immediately going into action to place that dog back in that sit.
Yeah.
In dog training, we should never take a wait and see approach.
No.
It's your butt is off the ground a 1/4 inch. I'm in motion to fix it.
Yeah.
And that is clarity to the dog, and that's fair to the dog.
Yeah, absolutely. I will take a wait and see approach once I know my dog has had enough training that thing that we talked about before, the value, is there for the thing I want them to do. And the likelihood of them offering me that thing because it's the most valuable thing that they could do in that scenario is 95% at least.
Right.
That's the point where I'll take a wait and see. But while my dog is still in training, I'm using the tools I have because I'm directing the behavior, right? And that's where a lot of times I think people are waiting for the dog to give them a better response before they react. And that's sort of like putting the cart before the horse, right? The dog doesn't necessarily know that they should be offering that good response. And the fact that they do it at home does not mean that they're going to do it out and about in the real world.
Yes.
This is where the generalization comes into play, and dogs don't generalize like humans do. So we need to go to the park. We need to go down the street. We need to go to the vet clinic. We need to go to a bunch of different places, practice these skills, make sure that the dog understands the rules are consistent with those skills, regardless of whether there's squirrels, regardless of whether there's a vet tech there that's really excited to see them, regardless of whether there's other dogs in the waiting room, regardless of whether we're going into this dog training school.
Right.
These rules are consistent. If I say sit, you're going to do it because I'm going to insist that you do it. And then you're going to remain in the sit until I release you. And that could be something that's keeping them safe while crossing the street. Or it could just be something that is, I need you to sit for a moment while I unlock the front door. But either way, it's consistent advice and consistent information for the dog. And the dog needs to hold position until they're released. So having said that.
It's a subtle way to show leadership.
Yes.
A very subtle way to show leadership.
That is brilliant, actually. And before we get to the release, let's talk about that for a moment, because I think that a lot of people are probably going, I don't understand what the connection is between a sit and leadership. But it is incredibly powerful for a human to say to a dog, you are going to do this thing even though you want to do that thing. And you're going to do this thing because I'm going to insist that you do this thing. And making that statement and follow through with something simple like a gentle sit placement is going to absolutely feed your leadership bank. And these are the things that make the difference. When we're like, sit, and then we wait to see if the dog's going to do it, and the dog doesn't do it, that takes money out of our leadership bank. Such an important thing. And I'm glad that you said that. I'm really glad you brought it up, because that is crucial.
Right, definitely, yes. If I see a dog sitting at its owner's side and there's chaos going around, I'm like, wow, that guy's got control of his dog.
Yeah.
Yes. Much more than, a dog that is in an empty room shaking a paw. It's like, there's no comparison there.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. Shake a paw it's an awesome trick, but You know what it would be? It would be the dog sitting at his side while chaos is going along, shaking a paw at the same time.
That is the ultimately trained dog.
Right, yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. But yeah, and like, here's the thing. Once you have the dog that says, okay, I have to be accountable to you. I have to respond when you've asked me to do something. In this scenario here, the sit, it doesn't seem like it would be connected to everything else, but it is. Because once they learn that they have no choice but to listen when you've asked them for something, that becomes the way of life, right? And then to put this in perspective, we're not just starting to train the dog to sit, doing this sit placement and then insisting they hold the sit. So I am placing my dog in the sit, loosening up on my leash, which is a really important component of things. He needs to be making the decision to hold the sit. It can't be me, so I'm not going to physically hold him in place. But I am building reinforcement value with this exercise. So I am going to the end of my driveway and I'm working the sit placement as the world goes by. But while my dog is holding that sit, I'm saying yes, and then reaching for food and rewarding. I'm paying off with my dog. I might take half of his meal and go down to the end of my driveway and do nothing other than make him sit at my side and hold that sit and watch the world go by for the 10 minutes that it takes for me to go through that ration of half of his meal. And that training, if he decides that he is going to get up and he gets an immediate sit placement back by me and then a few seconds before I reward him again, because of course, why is that? Why do I want to make sure if I've placed him, I don't feed him right away?
Oh, we don't want to reward an error.
Yeah.
So if our dog gets up and we place them in the sit and give them a treat, the dog says, oh, I know how to get a treat.
Yeah.
You get up, get placed, get a treat. Get up, get placed, get a treat.
Yeah.
Dogs are clever. So we need to hold off on rewards until the dog has done, at least 5 or 6 seconds of the good behavior that you want.
You bet.
We need to be clear what we're rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I'm first teaching them to accept the sit placement, I might do some rewarding in there. Yeah. So I might do some help with a little bit of a lure as I'm placing his butt. Or I might do the sit placement and then yes, and reward him right away so that he understands that this is a positive thing. It's not something I need to worry about. He understands what his responsibility is in it. He's not worried about the hands all over him. He's not questioning what the point is.
Right.
He's learning how to accept this thing. But as time goes on, I want to be very clear. If I need to use this placement to get you back into the sit, you're not getting a cookie until you've done a little bit more work.
Yes.
So.
Because people will often give it to the dog as an apology.
Yes.
I think it's like, oh, I feel bad. I placed them. Here's a treat.
Yeah.
So,
and you know what? Our dogs forgive us. They've moved on long before we have. So you do not need to apologize.
No, and dogs don't. That's not how you apologize to a dog anyways. True. No, it's giving them a treat doesn't negate something. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So the sit placement followed by a few seconds of calm. And then once they have committed to the sit again, and once they're trying hard and working hard, I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to reach for my food and I'm going to reward that again. And over time, of course, I'm elongating the time between rewards. I don't want to always have to be dependent on food. I also don't want to always have to be dependent on the sit placement. We teach our dogs a get in command that has them move to our side and then sit. But the sit placement when my dog wants to do something else is a very different thing from that get in command.
Now, when you have your dog, sit in place, do you tell them stay or wait?
I do not.
No, it's implied.
Yeah, this is a really good question.
Right.
So there's already enough complexity in this, right? When I say stay to my dog, it's only when I'm leaving his side. Okay, sit means sit otherwise. And if I have just said sit, I expect him to sit wherever he happens to be. If I say get in and sit, I expect him to sit at my side. And I'm not going to worry about adding other words. He doesn't need to hear stay in that situation because I'm not leaving his side, right? I'm standing at the end of my driveway. He's sitting at the end of my driveway. I'm doing this sit placement. He's watching the world go by. He might get distracted. There's a kid on a skateboard that comes by and he gets distracted and gets up out of the sit. I'm just going to place him back, loosen up on the leash, let him settle into the sit again, and then get that reward in. But at no point do I need to add more complexity in the form of verbal commands to this thing. Already, verbal commands are not a natural thing to the dog. So I'm going to say sit just before I place him into the sit so that there's this identity of what I'm asking him to do. But truly, I don't even really need to do that.
Right. Yes.
If I wanted to make things super simple for the dog, I could just go to the sit placement. He gets up, I place him back. I don't need to add all these complex things.
Yes.
Understanding that he may or may not know what a stay command even is to begin with.
Right.
But it's still not.
Yes. And people often get wrapped up in the words and what words they should use. And really, it's your actions that are what is counting for this.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Your quick actions.
Yeah. And the mental change for your dog when they realize that they have to do something, even though they want to do something else, like that is such a good mental change for them, right? It's sort of like what we do with our kids when we try some sort of a punishment that makes sense to them, whether it's withholding their allowance, whether it's grounding them. You know what happens?
I always
with
got
kids
chocolate
today?
milk taken away, and I had to drink plain old white milk.
There you go.
That was my
Absolutely.
punishment.
So that is quite
and
the
it worked
punishment.
too. It worked.
Well, for somebody like Swanee who lives on sugar, you know, that would have probably put her into this complete funked state.
Yeah, like
where she's
having a glass of white milk with supper.
There you go. So
everyone else had chocolate.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to affect change in behavior, right? We don't want Swanee to feel horrible about her actions, but we want her to think about what she's doing. We want her to change her behavior for the next time, because obviously whatever choices she made to get her chocolate milk taken away were not the right choices. 2 weeks. Oh, that's a long period of time.
It is. It was awful.
And our dogs are not humans, so they're not thinking in the same way. But what we need to do is we need to make them go, okay, what I'm doing here isn't working. What should I be looking at to get influenced in this world? And of course, it's us standing there saying, no, you have to sit. You have to sit. You have to sit. Right. There's nothing wrong with telling a dog you must do this thing. Yes. We use our pre-taught things like the sit placement to do it. And we insist that the dog does this thing for this period of time. We insist that our dogs come when they're called. We insist that they walk nicely on leash. And we insist that they sit and stay when they are told, sometimes using a stay command and sometimes just saying sit.
Yep.
And those basics are what drive our leadership. That coupled with good management that doesn't let the dog rule the roost and run the show when you're not in training mode.
Right.
That's the magic that creates a well-behaved dog.
Right.
You know,
yes.
Those simple things, good foundational teaching where we make sure that they understand it's not optional.
Right.
And management around the house. And that formula is going to get you to a dog who will eventually listen and listen very well once they understand how to do so.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And when you see somebody out on the street and their dog is behaving, you know, I know a lot of people often go to, well, he got a good dog. But no, that dog
All dogs are good dogs.
They are, but that dog got a good trainer.
Yes.
So that often is the difference. You know, you see a dog that's going wild on the street and you see a dog that is behaving. Yeah. It's not that the wild dog is unteachable. No. It's most likely the person hasn't put the work into the dog yet.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're going to, but they haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
So the other person has put the work in the dog.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, truly don't search the internet for the magical solution that's going to get you there. And don't think that you need to be this perfection of a trainer before you can have a well-behaved dog. It's not that at all. It's things like what we're talking about today. Right. Saying you must, holding the dog accountable to the things that you've asked them to do, and making it fun, of course. You know, we're talking about the placement part itself. So we're not talking as much about all the in-between stuff. But I truly wouldn't go to the end of my driveway and make my dog sit there for a full 10 minutes. I might do 10 minutes worth of training at the end of my driveway with that sit placement being the main component. But there's going to be lots of times in there where I say, okay, and I release the dog and maybe I pull out a toy and we have a little play because I want to drive engagement as well as this insistence that he hold the sit.
But so as a trained dog, you might go to the end of your driveway and talk to your neighbor for 10 minutes and have your dog sit beside you. Yes.
Truly an excellent point. Yeah, absolutely. And at that point, once he is trained, I expect him to self-govern in this situation, right? I expect to be able, with Ned, for example. So Ned is 7. Levon is 7.5 months. Ned is 7 years. If I went to the end of the driveway with Ned, I was checking my mail, and then I started having a conversation with my neighbor, I would expect that I could say sit or lie down to Ned, and I could just ignore him then for the 10 minutes we're talking. and then turn around, have him be in the same position. You know, maybe he's scratched himself a little bit, or he's licked something, or he's sniffed the ground a bit. But aside from that, he'd be holding that position, right? If I say sit, he's going to be sitting when I turn around 10 minutes later. I'd be floored if he wasn't. And it's not that Ned doesn't make mistakes, but he's 7, and I've trained him consistently all his life, and I've insisted whenever he's said, no, I want to do this thing over here instead of doing what you want me to do. No,
you go and get him, and
you know what? Perfect example. I have 1 million bunnies on my property. I've talked about the bunnies on my property all the time.
You should open it up as a bunny farm for people to come visit.
Absolutely. And you know what? Wear your bunny costumes, and I'm going to put the Elmer Fudd signs out there, and life's going to be great.
Yeah, walk with the bunnies.
Yeah, but in the morning, we've talked about this. In the morning, he goes out looking for bunnies. You know, his main focus is, I want to chase those bunnies. When he goes off the deck and he goes tearing to the first spot that he thinks there might be a bunny, I call his name instantly, and he turns and he comes back to me every single time. And if he didn't, if he even one time made me call him a second time, okay, we're going back. We're going to deal with this. I'm going to do some reminders. I cannot have this, especially when the stakes are that high, right? He's that adrenalized. If he doesn't respond on my first command, I'm in trouble. So as soon as that starts to slip, I'm going to be going back to basics and making sure that he understands you are not allowed to ignore your name, whether that's putting a long line on him, you know, whatever the case may be. I'm going to make sure that I am practicing that skill so that he gets it right. So here is a situation where he goes out wanting to do that thing, and I say, no, you cannot do that thing. Come this way instead. That is such a powerful thing. And that one scenario bleeds into the psyche that is in his head. With, I can't quite recall what my original point is with this, but I think it was more about the trained dog. So as an example, to continue, Ned is in a much more realistic spot to come off the deck and then get a quick turn back to me, even if I don't call his name, because he's had so much value building in that situation, versus Levon, who once he spots that first bunny to chase and starts chasing it, this is the first part of the history of this bunny chase. So I need to make sure that the first time he goes to chase a bunny, I can call him off of that. Which means if he starts showing interest in chasing like Ned does, I will have him on the line. So that the first time he sees that bunny and goes running, I can call his name, leave on, stop him, turn him back to me, and then have that party, right? So that's a really important distinction to make, right?
Yes. It's somewhat like, if you think about it like with a teacher, some teachers have great control over the class, whereas you get a supply teacher come in, and right off the bat, one of the kids pushes a bit. Let's test the new supply teacher, and the new supply teacher doesn't stand up to the test. Well, the class is in an uproar. You know, people are throwing things around, getting up, running around because nothing happened. And our dogs soon learn that too. It's like, okay, they're making me toe the line. I need to do this. But as soon as they see that you're not going to make them toe the line, now it suddenly starts to, you know, well, why listen? I can do this. And
absolutely. And dogs learn that so quickly.
They do.
Because we lack the consistency in our training, and then they get the reward for doing the thing that we don't want them to do, or the thing that they want to do that's contrary to what we want them to do. They go and they get that reward. We've lost our management piece. And now in addition to that, there's some people who are standing there waiting for the dog to then come back and offer them good behavior. And it's like, no. We need to guide. We need to steer. We need to show them what we want them to do. And keep it simple. I mean, I see there's so much complexity building into everyday foundational dog training now. It doesn't need to be this complicated. Truly, show them what you want them to do. Make sure that they do it. Make it valuable for them to do it. But when they decide not to do it, have a plan so that you can make it happen. And there's your leadership, 100% right there.
I think I mentioned one time before, but we talked about, I think they're dream boards or boards.
Vision boards.
Vision boards. Yeah. So when you get your new puppy, think of the things you want. So you want your puppy to be able to sit. You want him to be able to come when called. You want him to walk nice on lead, and put them on your vision board. And then those are the must-haves. Then you could put little things that would be nice, you know, if he does too. Like, you know, he's a great swimmer, or he rolls over. Like
he's a great swimmer. I love it.
Those are nice things to have. But there are foundations. So don't get swept up in all the fancy stuff.
All the fancy stuff. Yeah, if you wait for them to offer, that's going to be really powerful. Okay, but they're never going to offer it if they don't find it valuable. We're working with creatures that are instinctive, so we need to make that happen, and then we might be able to get some sort of an offer there too.
Yes.
So foundation, steering, helping, coaching, showing, and working with distractions as well with tools like the sit placement so that you can gently insist. And that way your dog says, oh, okay, even though there's something I'd rather do, I have to do this thing.
And your dog's never too old to get started.
Never too old. Oh, that is an excellent point. The old dogs not learning new tricks is just baloney, right, Honda?
Right. Old dogs love to learn. They love to learn.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And on that note, I'm Instructor Shannon.
Instructor Christine.
Happy training.
The McCann Dogs Podcast is brought to you by McCann Professional Dog Trainers. We help dog owners to have a well-behaved, four-legged family member. Please give us a call at 905-659-1888 or visit us at mccanndogs.com. Happy training!